a man, who they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Bacon makes everything better, including bacon. Bacon with bacon is heaven. The only thing better than bacon is coffee. I tried bacon flavored coffee one time. It was interesting. You expect to have a mouthful of coffee and you taste bacon instead. The Organic Man coffee trike does not have bacon flavored coffee, but they do have the best coffee in the universe. If you think I'm just saying that, prove me wrong. 4501 McPherson and see if I know my coffee. If you don't live in Laredo, go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. David Subith sent me some ideas for shows. One was on how the U.S. Air Force has accidentally lost several nuclear weapons. When was the last time you lost something that cost $50 million? I'll bet you'd scramble to find anything costing that much. When I got to Laredo, the Border Patrol was still carrying revolvers. To make matters even worse, we were only authorized to have 12 extra rounds on our PBS. That's pistol belt and stuff. This led to many of us carrying speed loaders, which were not actually authorized, but a lot of the supervisors turned a blind eye. The bad guys were carrying fully automatic weapons. They had all the ammunition a person could carry. You only have too much ammo under two conditions: you're on fire or you're drowning. We did have M16s locked away in the armory. You could check one out if you didn't mind having a weapon that you'd never sighted in, because we had 16 rifles for 75 agents. Ah, the good old days. One day, Washington had one of those rare moments when somebody decided maybe we should be allowed to carry our own weapon, as long as it fell within certain guidelines. There was a short list of what we could carry, and we had to maintain it to BP standards. I bought a SIG 226. I liked having 15 rounds in the magazine. I carried 2 extras. One night I was working down at One River Place. We had parked and walked in. It was midnight, and we snuck to our positions to watch and wait. As soon as I got into position, I did a quick equipment check. I discovered I was missing a magazine. Those things cost $45 each, and that was out of my pocket. I had paid for the gear, and I really didn't like the idea of throwing money away. The mag pouches were made by a company supplying the government. In other words, as cheap as possible. The lowest bidder at its finest. I began to crawl on my hands and knees back along the trail I had just walked on. I swept my fingers back and forth because light was not an option if I didn't want the bad guys to know that we were there. I found my missing magazine and I returned to my lookout spot. This was my equipment and my equivalent of a broken arrow. To me, $45 was a lot. To the government, well, They can't think in digits lower than thousands. It's funny, but not really, how the lowest bidder somehow always manages to equate to the highest prices. I wonder where all that extra money is going. Hmm. Our deputy chief came out and told us that we had all wasted our money buying our own weapons because the government was about to issue us semi autos any day now. Once this happened, we would no longer be authorized to carry our privately owned sidearms. He made a big deal about how we had wasted our money. The following year, he made the same speech about how any day now the government was going to issue us semi autos, followed by the year after, and the year after that. I carried my own weapon at work for 8 years. The government finally got around to issuing us the lowest bidder when it came to sidearms. A total piece of junk. We were told, and I'm not kidding here, we were told that on the weekends we had to empty the magazines so that the spring wouldn't wear out. Somebody doesn't understand how a spring works, but that's what we were told. They supplied the frontline agents who are supposed to be protecting our country the cheapest handgun they could find. Someone was getting rich on this contract as we all got to work with junk. This leaves a lot of questions on why government equipment is so cheaply made yet costs so much. When I hear somebody on TV advertising military grade items, I think that simply means the lowest bidder. The government has no way of making money aside from printing it. When someone says it's funded by the government, this means that you and I are paying the bills. The money is coming from our wallets to be used for whatever projects those people think will make life better. Well, it does make life better for them. During World War II, the United States was frantically trying to create a nuclear weapon before Adolf could roll one out. There are rumors that he beat us, but that's another show. The show is called The Nazi A-Bomb, and I put it out March 2021. The folks working on the Manhattan Project did manage to extract enough uranium 235 to build 2 bombs. This is what I was told in high school. Just 2. They dropped Fat Man and Little Boy on Japan, causing the war to end and Godzilla to begin. Before blasting Japan into submission, a test was run to see if the bomb would actually work. At White Sands, they tested one device known only as the gadget. The test went as planned, and the military went on building 2 more weapons, using the uranium they had, which, if you're paying attention, should now only be enough for 1 bomb. This is so much like the shooting at Dealey Plaza, where the police recovered 2 expended rifle cases that magically turned into 3 when the detective in charge found a third case that magically turned up in his pocket. I used to wonder where that extra uranium came from, and then I read about the Nazi bomb and how, at the end of World War II, some of their uranium wound up in the United States. That which has been learned cannot be unlearned. Once the genie was out of the bottle, nobody could put it back in. The world had entered the atomic age. The new and wonderful world where total destruction was just minutes away. I lived through the whole duck and cover nonsense. Once those pesky Russians got their hands on nuclear weapons, our government, well, the military industrial complex, went into overdrive to build bigger and better bombs. There was no limit, seeing as they weren't paying any of the bills. It all came down in the form of our taxes going up. In the 40s and 50s, there were no long range missiles to carry death to the enemy. The only way to get her done was by using bombers manned by crews of airmen ready and willing to boldly go, well, to fly into Russian territory and spank them big time. 1946, the U.S. only had 9 atomic bombs, which were being controlled by the Atomic Energy Commission, and the U.S. Army Air Corps only had 27 B 29s capable of delivering them. Strategic Air Command was born, and our taxes went up some more. It was later determined that an attack by the 509th Composite Bomb Group during the 1947s and 48s would have required 5 to 6 days just to transfer custody of the bombs from the Energy Commission sites to sack and deploy the aircraft and weapons to forward operating bases before launching a nuclear strike. SAC transferred to the United States Air Force on September 1947. Folks were afraid of reliving another Pearl Harbor. What if those sneaky Russians pulled off a sneak attack? How were we going to retaliate? The idea was hatched to move the nuclear weapons from the civilian agency to the military, plus to maintain flights of bombers all over the world that could be sent in to do the deed at a moment's notice. The military industrial complex got busy making more nuclear bombs and the aircraft to deliver them. The CIA kept telling the president those Ruskies had thousands of bombers all lined up and ready to destroy America. War means more. More jobs, more money for the right people, more huge contracts to build all those fancy airplanes, and more luxury accommodations for the generals and the politicians who were all rattling their sabers. The military must like being kept in a. Try that again. The military must be kept in a state of readiness and constantly trained to do their jobs. It's nothing like any civilian job where you do what you've been told and taught and you get paid for it. In the military, you have to be ready to do things that you can't normally do, like kill people. Remember, to live in peace, you must prepare for war. I remember that night on the tank range when, as we rolled out to the firing line, I heard the gunner, Coach, praying. He forgot his mic was on. He said, God grant me a keen eye and a steady hand so I can kill my fellow man. He was a very complex man. The B 36 Peacekeeper. Yeah, you got to hand it to the folks coming up with those names. Not Death from Above, not the Fire and Destruction Bringer, the Peacemaker. There's nothing as peaceful as a bunch of dead folks. This was a prop driven bomber with the blades on the trailing edge of the wing. The 15-man crew could relax in a chow hall, or they could catch a few Z's in the sleeping bay. Some critics referred to this aircraft as a $1 billion blunder. Air crews used to say they had 6 engines turning with 4 burning. February 14th, 1950, a B 36 took off from Eisler Air Force Base in Alaska en route to Carswell Air Force Base in Texas. The crew was training for a bombing run in case those Russians attacked. Off the northwest coast of British Columbia near Prince Royal Island, the plane did what it had a reputation for doing. The engines caught fire. The pilot radioed in he was having engine trouble and he was losing altitude. What do to keep your plane in the air? You lighten the load. The bomber was carrying one little bitty bomb, a 30 kiloton Mark IV. Not wanting to have a crash with a nuclear warhead on the plane, the crew was ordered to drop the bomb into the Pacific Ocean. After the crash, 10 crewmen were found, 5 were missing, presumed dead, and the nuclear bomb, well, it is still missing as well. According to the official report, the bomb did not contain the plutonium core necessary for a nuclear detonation. If it did, I'm sure they would let us know. The folks building bombers just kept doodling away and coming up with new planes to sell to the government. Some numbers were skipped as the military didn't put every craft they tried into service. The B 36 was replaced by the B 47. They dropped from a crew of 15 to 3. They could carry 25,000 pounds of bombs. That's 61,000 less than the B 36, but they could get over the target a heck of a lot faster. Add to this, the new bombs were far more efficient in blowing things up, so it would take fewer in the payload. The iconic B 17 from World War II could only carry about 6,000 pounds of bombs. The folks flying these B 47 Stratojets had to know how to avoid enemy fighters and deliver their bombs to whichever target they were assigned. The plane was slow to take off, and then it came in way too fast. They had to use a drag chute to slow the plane down so it wouldn't overshoot the runway. The thing needed improvement. Over its operating life, 203 B 47s were lost to crashes, with 464 deaths. This represented about 10% of the total number produced. Remember what I said about the lowest bidder? March 10th, 1956, 4 B 47s left MacDill Air Force Base in Florida for a non stop flight to Ben Guerir Air Base in Morocco. After descending through the clouds to begin their second round of aerial refueling over the Mediterranean Sea, one of the 4 aircraft was missing. It didn't come down to get gassed up. The aircraft and its 2 nuclear weapons and 3-man crew were never found. Just a couple of nuclear bombs sitting on the bottom of the Mediterranean. What could possibly go wrong? The folks in charge keep telling us everything is perfectly safe. Nothing can possibly go wrong because they have thought of everything. October 17th, 1981, near Buchanan, New York, 100,000 gallons of Hudson River water leaked into the Indian Point Energy Center containment building from the fan cooling unit. It went undetected by any of the safety devices that were supposed to detect this sort of thing. The flooding covered up the 9 feet of the reactor, which was only discovered when technicians walked into the building. Two pumps, which should have removed the water, were inoperative. The NRC proposed a $210,000 fine for the incident instead of firing the folks in charge. In December 2019, in Nebraska, one of two safety related components, cooling systems, of the Cooper Nuclear Station was unable to operate because its service water system, that takes water from the river, was plugged up with silt. Nothing can go wrong. July 28, 1957, a C-24A Globemaster II aircraft departed Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, bound for Europe by way of the Azores. The C-124 was carrying 3 Mark V atomic bombs and a nuclear capsule. The Mark V's were said to be in transport mode, not having the detonators in place. This is the official word from the Air Force. The power supplies were installed in the weapons, but they were not connected. The Mark V's did contain most of the high explosive used to implode the composite uranium plutonium material. Weather forecasts were favorable, and the planes took off from Dover on time. The C-124A got into trouble off of Cape May in southern New Jersey. Both port-side radial engines lost power and had to be shut down. I was in a Air Force airplane one time that lost 2 engines on the same wing, and it is a very interesting situation. The crew attempted to compensate using increased power from the starboard engines, but they were unable to maintain control of the flight, and the aircraft began losing altitude. In an effort to lighten the load, the fuel required for their long overwater trip to the Azores was partially dumped, but it wasn't enough to keep the plane aloft, not afloat. The closest suitable recovery airfield was Naval Air Station Atlantic City, inland from Egg Harbor. The crew was forced to lighten their weight to get there on 2 engines. They jettisoned a Mark V device from an altitude of 4,500 feet, around 75 miles off the coast of New Jersey. The Globemaster continued to lose altitude, and a second Mark V was jettisoned into the Atlantic from an altitude of 2,500 feet, roughly 50 miles off the coast. The C-124 was able to land at the Naval Air Station. The air crew said the bombs fell into the ocean without detonating. A search for the weapons commenced immediately and lasted for 3 months. Neither bomb could be located. This was long before GPS was invented, so the only way to find them was sonar sweeps back and forth. Unable to find the missing bombs, the Air Force simply ordered up a new pair. They weren't having to pay for them, so why not? No public announcement of this incident was made at the time that it happened. With the Cold War in full swing, the government didn't want to let the enemy know they had lost 2 bombs. To begin with, it would look bad, and there was the slight chance that the Russians would try searching for the bomb and It was just possible that they might succeed where the US had failed. Back during the Cold War, the USSR, or Soviets, were referred to simply as the Russians or the Ruskies, depending on who you were talking to. I never once heard anyone say the Soviets or the Soviet Union or the USSR. It was always just the Russians. Where have we heard the Russians lately? They were in the news a lot a while ago. I can't remember why, but I remember I kept hearing somebody referring to the Russians. February 5th, 1958, a B 47 bomber was on a simulated combat mission from Homestead Air Force Base in Florida, carrying a single 7,600-pound bomb. The official story is the bomb did not have the core in place. They keep saying that. Others say the bomb was complete and it was ready to go off if necessary. At about 2 a.m., the F 86 fighter collided with the six engine B 47. The F 86 pilot ejected and parachuted to safety near Estelle, South Carolina, 10 miles east of Savannah, Georgia. I would not want to have had to write that memo. Dear Chief, I accidentally crashed one of your bombers. Well, it wouldn't be the chief, but we used to write those at work all the time. The damaged B 47 remained airborne, dropping from 38,000 feet as the air crew began to frantically try to gain control. This is when pilots earned their pay. The plane leveled out at 2,000 feet. The crew requested permission to jettison the bomb in order to reduce weight and prevent the weapon from going off when they landed. Now, if it didn't have the core, why were they afraid that it would go off? Permission was granted and the bomb was jettisoned at 7,200 feet as the plane was traveling at 230 miles an hour. The crew said they did not see an explosion when the weapon struck the ocean. They managed to land the B 47 successfully at Hunter Air Force Base just south of Savannah. The Air Force, who has never lied to us, not once, including that weather balloon incident, swore the bomb did not have its core in place. The Atomic Energy Commission form signed by the aircraft commander stated the bomb contained a simulated 150-pound cap made of lead. As time goes on, things come to light, no matter how hard folks try to keep them secret. During 1966 congressional testimony by Assistant Secretary of Defense W.J. Howard, the Tybee Island bomb was said to be a complete weapon, a bomb with the nuclear capsule, and one of two weapons lost that contained the plutonium trigger. Now, the Air Force said there was only one bomb on board, but this guy is telling Congress there were two, and they were both ready to go. Starting February 6th, 1958, the Air Force 2700th Explosives Ordnance Disposal Squadron and 100 Navy personnel equipped with handheld sonar and galvanic devices drug a cable back and forth across the area. April 16th, the military announced the search had been unsuccessful. Based on hydrographic survey in 2001, the bomb is thought by the Department of Energy to be buried under 5 to 15 feet of silt at the bottom of Wassaw Sound. 2004, a retired Air Force lieutenant said he had narrowed down the bomb's location to an area about the size of a football field. His search had used a towed Geiger counter, and he said he found radiation levels higher in this one location. An Air Force nuclear weapons advisor came out saying the source of the radiation was natural, originating from deposits of monazite. 2007, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources said there was no undue levels of unnatural radioactive contamination detected in the region upper Floridian aquifer. Too many big words there. November 4th, 1958, at Dyes Air Force Base here in Texas, a plane carrying a nuclear weapon burst into flames during takeoff. The weapon's high explosives detonated, killing a crew member, but the nuclear core remained intact. Only half a mile from the crash site was the Butterfield Elementary School. Later, it was learned the bomb might have gone off had two wires crossed as the insulation was burned off. The Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, said, by the slightest margin of chance, literally, the failure of two wires to cross, a nuclear explosion was averted. McNamara was quoted as saying this in an article called The Guardian. September 25th, 1959, off the coast of Washington and Oregon, a Navy P-5M, kind of a flying boat, it was designed for naval patrols and anti-submarine warfare, was carrying a nuclear anti-submarine weapon over the Pacific Ocean. The military said the bomb was not armed, but you know how that is. The plane crashed about 100 miles west of the border between the two states. The investigation report as to why the plane went down were never released to the public. The 10-man crew were all successfully rescued and brought back to land within an hour of the crash. The missing weapon could not be found. The authorities swore the bomb could not be detonated, but it still had its nuclear materials, which could be used by those people, should they manage to find it. I do not for the life of me understand why they have to fly around with actual honest to God nuclear weapons, even if the core is supposedly not in them. Couldn't they just get like a giant barrel full of cement and call it an atomic bomb for the day? January 23rd, 1961, a B 52G took off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Oh, that's Goldsboro, North Carolina. It was a part of Operation Cover All, a continuous flight of bombers that flew to the Canadian Arctic Circle and back. This was to keep nuclear armed bombers in the air at all times. They would fly north to their fail-safe location and then turn around and come back. During the Cold War, bomber crews would begin the opening maneuvers of World War III and then turn back at the last possible moment. This was going on day and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Around midnight, the bomber had a rendezvous with a tanker for aerial refueling. During the hookup, the tanker crew advised the B 52 commander that his plane had a fuel leak in the right wing. The refueling was aborted, and the ground crew was notified of the problem. The pilots were directed to assume a holding pattern off the coast until a majority of the fuel was consumed before landing. When they reached their assigned position, the pilot reported the leak had worsened and that 37,000 pounds of fuel had been lost in just 3 minutes. The aircraft was immediately directed to return to base and land. As the aircraft approached the airfield, the pilots were no longer able to keep it stable, descending, and lost control. The right wing decided this was a good time to leave the rest of the plane, and it fell off. The pilot ordered the crew to bail out. 5 men landed safely after ejecting. One did not survive his parachute landing, and 2 men died in the crash. The pilotless aircraft broke up in the air shortly after the crew ejected. Witnesses reported seeing 2 flashes of red light, suggesting fuel explosions contributed to the breakup of the plane. The aircraft wreckage covered a 2 square mile area of tobacco and cotton farmland about 12 miles north of Goldsboro. Explosives ordnance disposal teams from several bases arrived on the scene quickly, disarming the one bomb that was easily accessible. Representatives from the Albuquerque Operations Office of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission were alerted to the accident on the morning of January 24th. A team of scientists and engineers from Sandia National Laboratories. Scandia is a kind of shelf like what I've got behind me. The Sandia National Laboratories, Los Alamo National Laboratory, and representatives from the Department of Defense Nuclear Safety Research Directorate were flown to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base. They were there to see just how close we came to having a nuclear bomb detonate. Now remember, this plane was not training. They were actually flying as if they were going into Russia to spank them bigly. The 2 bombs involved in the accident were Mark 39 thermonuclear weapons with a productive yield of 3.8 megatons. A megaton is like 1,000 tons of TNT. So 3 of those. The safety precautions included a rod that was pulled from the bomb only once it fell from the bomber, and a device that had to rotate as the bomb fell, allowing the bomb to explode. Official reports identified the 2 bombs as weapon number 1 and weapon number 2. Number 1's parachute deployed, whereas number 2 simply fell to the ground. Weapon number 1 was flung from the aircraft at an altitude of 9,000 feet. Twisting from its rack caused the safety pin on its arming rod to be pulled out, thus arming the bomb. The explosive actuator triggered by deployment of the bomb's parachute was in normal functioning mode. As far as that bomb was concerned, it was an intentional drop, like the bomb in Dark Star, and it was en route to do what it was designed to do: explode. One safety switch said, nay, nay, and kept the bomb from going off. Weapon number 2 fell from the plane right after number 1. It didn't receive the same signal from its arming mechanism, and it hit the ground still with all safety devices intact. It broke to pieces on impact. The EOD technicians spent several days attempting to recover its pieces from the deep mud. A representative of the Atomic Energy Commission noted that after the discovery of the arm safe switch was in the armed position and the arming rod had been pulled out, he and his colleagues wondered why bomb number 1 didn't go off. Parts of number 2 bomb containing uranium could not be recovered, even after excavating 50 feet down into the waterlogged farmland. The Air Force brought the land, using our tax dollars, And anyone who wants to dig in the area must get the Air Force's permission today. There is no detectable radiation or hazard in the area, the Department of Energy has said. What can possibly go wrong? I have to ask, if the thing missing is radioactive, why is there no danger? 1966, a B 52 Stratofortress of the Strategic Air Command collided midair with a KC 135 Strato tanker. Mid-air collisions never have a happy outcome. This took place over Palomares, Spain, causing debris to rain down on the farming community, including bits and pieces of two of its four nuclear bombs, which it was carrying at the time. These were not the typical A bombs from years gone by, but hydrogen bombs with a lot more destructive power. The high explosive igniters in two of the bombs detonated on impact, spreading radioactive material, including plutonium 239, over a wide area of the Spanish countryside. Surprisingly, safety mechanisms and electronics prevented a nuclear explosion. A third A bomb landed by parachute in a stream where it was easily recovered, and a fourth bomb landed in the Mediterranean Ocean or Sea. The U.S. Navy searchers took 3 months to find and recover that fourth bomb. The U.S. government dispatched a small submarine named the Alvin. Some of y'all older listeners will recognize that name, to find the bomb in the Mediterranean. Alvin got tangled up in the parachute that was still attached to the bomb. This nearly caused the crew's deaths. Had the submarine accidentally jarred the bomb, it might have detonated the explosive charge, which would have flattened the submarine, like a depth charge during World War II. A large amount of contaminated Spanish soil was removed, packed up, and shipped across the Atlantic for disposal near Barnwell, South Carolina, the site of a large installation of U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. The movie Men of Honor, that came out in 2000, starring Cuba Gooding Jr., was based on this incident, but Hollywood did enhance it considerably. Carl Brashear was born January 19th, 1931. He joined the United States Navy wanting to become a diver. While attending diving school in Bayonne, New Jersey, Brashear faced hostility and racism. He would find notes on his bunk saying, "We're going to drown you today," and other such pleasant notices. Despite the loving fellowship of his fellow students, he managed to graduate. During the bomb recovery operation on March 23rd, 1966, a lifting cable snapped, causing a pipe to swing across the deck of the USS Hoist. Brashear darted to push a shipmate out of the object's path. It consequently struck Brashear's left leg just below the knee, nearly chopping it off. The impact flipped him into the ear, and he nearly was thrown off the side of the boat. He was evacuated to Torreon Air Base in Spain, then to the USAF hospital in Wiesbaden Air Base, Germany, and finally he wound up in the Navy hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. His lower leg was eventually amputated. Not letting a little thing like a missing leg stand in his way, Brashear went on to become a master diver. The 1966 incident had several casualties, but we're not supposed to talk about that. The enlisted men who were dispatched to clean up the mess eventually began developing cancer at an alarming rate. Who would have thought picking up bits of a hydrogen bomb could be hazardous to your health? In 2001, the Centro de Investigación Energéticas Medium, oh boy, I don't speak Spanish nearly well enough to pronounce that word. They detected measurable levels of radioactive element plutonium, uranium, and americium over a 24-acre section of Palomares. The experts keep telling us everyone, even though the experts keep telling everyone, even though two hydrogen bombs were scattered across the area, there's nothing to worry about. The food is safe. The water is okay. The debris site is still fenced off, and folks are encouraged to stay away from the field where the bombs landed. October 19th, 2015, Spain and the United States signed a statement of intent to discuss further cleanup of the area. Eventually, the United States agreed to remove additional contaminated soil from Palomares to a safe burial site here in the United States. Men of Honor was not the first and only film based on this incident. I wonder how many of y'all ever saw the movie The Day the Fish Came Out. The film was set in 1972 and was inspired by the incident involving the B 52 Stratofortress colliding with the Stratotanker. In the first opening scene, there's a chorus of Spanish flamenco dancers, and they're singing a song explaining why the film's location is in Greece instead of Spain. Right from the get go, you know you're in for some entertainment. Life on the island of Karos is bleak as some inhabitants stage a mass exodus on hearing news that Denmark has opened up Greenland to Greek immigration. A bomber from an unnamed country is flying over the island when they experience engine trouble and they're forced to eject the two nuclear bombs and a huge box called Container Q, containing some bizarre and scary stuff. The pilots drop their payload on the island because they are ordered not to drop it in the sea. Once the plane is devoid of cargo, the pilots bail out as well. In order to disguise their identities, they remove their uniforms and they spend the rest of the movie running around the island in their underwear. The folks in charge of the country that the plane came from send a team of military personnel to recover the bomb and especially that box. Not wanting anybody to know the island has two bombs sitting on it, these soldiers all dress up to look like tourists. When the people living on Karos see all of these tourists suddenly arrive, word spreads that they're actually resort executives there to scope out the island and build a multi-million-dollar resort for the extreme rich to come and frolic in the sun. The search team goes around buying parts of the island so they can control the areas in order to remove the two bombs. The box is still missing. Word gets out that Karos is soon to become the in place to be, and loads of jet setters converge on the place. The music is very different. The partying crowd keeps dancing to a song called The Jet. Lots of weird music and weirder dancing. These two airmen running around in their underwear, they see all this activity, but they don't realize that the troops are there to rescue them as well as secure the bombs and the box. So they just keep running around the island trying to avoid anyone and everyone. If you like Dr. Strangelove, you should get a kick out of The Day the Fish Came Out. Don't worry about any of the technical details. Just sit back and enjoy. It was a heck of a romp. It's a good thing all the mistakes have been made in the past, and we can sit back and relax knowing Nuclear weapons are in safe hands. August 29th, 2007, 6 AGM-129 ACM cruise missiles, each loaded with a W80-1 variable yield nuclear warhead, were mistakenly loaded into a United States Air Force B-52 heavy bomber at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota. The plane took off and flew to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. The nuclear warheads in these missiles were supposed to have been removed before the missiles were taken from their storage bunkers. The missiles with nuclear warheads were not reported missing and remained mounted to the aircraft at both Minot and Barksdale for 36 hours. During this time, the warheads were not protected by the various mandatory security precautions for nuclear weapons. Some janitor could have walked out, bumped the warhead with his broom, and set the thing off. In response to this incident, the United States Department of Defense and the USAF conducted an investigation, the results of which were released October 19th, 2007. The investigation concluded the nuclear weapons handling standards and procedures had not been followed by numerous USAF personnel involved in the incident. Don't worry, nothing can go wrong. 4 USAF commanders were relieved of their commands. Numerous other USAF personnel were disciplined and decertified to perform certain types of sensitive duties, and further cruise missile transport missions from and nuclear weapons operations at Minot Air Force Base were suspended. In addition, the USAF issued new nuclear weapons handling instructions and procedures. You're still dealing with humans, and humans are fallible. So simply by making extra rules, that's kind of like passing a law against murder. Separate investigations by the Defense Science Board reported concerns existed on the procedures and the process for handling nuclear weapons within the Department of Defense, but did not find any failure with the security of the United States nuclear weapons. So the weapons were fine, it's the people. I know mistakes happen. When you're working with bombs that can destroy entire cities, you should be a lot more careful in what you're doing. It's not like a wheel might come off killing a few folks. Your actions could kill millions of people. The people tasked with any handling of nuclear bombs need to be motivated to do a good job. A huge bonus when they get it right, and a slap about the head with a dead fish when they screw up. Maybe public uh, spankings if nothing else will work. If you knew that you were going to be drug out in front of all your friends and relatives and have your butt smacked with a switch like that kid in the was it the no, was it the Philippines? Well, anyway, if you knew that that was in your future, wouldn't you be a heck of a lot more careful how you did your job? The Air Force aren't the only ones screwing up. The Navy is capable of stepping in it as well. December 5th, 1965, 31 days after the Ticonderoga departed the U.S. naval base in Subic Bay in the Philippines, an A-4E Skyhawk attack jet was accidentally pushed backwards over the side of the ship. It was on number 2 elevator. The ship was involved in a training exercise, and the crew was doing all the things they would have done in a war. The pilot, Lieutenant Douglas M. Webster, the aircraft, and the B-43 nuclear bomb were never recovered from the deep water. The accident occurred 68 miles from Kikai Island, Kagoshima Prefecture, Japan. There's something about Japan is just attracting nuclear explosions and accidents and bombs. I don't know what it is. To add to the confusion, nobody is certain if the plane was carrying one or two nuclear bombs. The Navy said there was just one, but Los Alamos National Lab reports there were two weapons involved. 1989, the United States Department of Defense revealed the proximity of the loss of one or two 1 megaton H bombs to Japanese territory. Oh, by the way, we lost a couple of nuclear bombs right off your coast. Don't worry, it's all perfectly safe. Nothing can go wrong. May 1968, the U.S. submarine Scorpion sank to the bottom of the Atlantic for unknown reasons, carrying all hands and two Mark 45 Astor torpedoes with nuclear warheads. The incident was not included in the list of missing nukes because the United States government found the wreck and they know exactly where they are. They just can't get down there and recover them. Where's Howard Hughes when you need him? It may sound as if I'm making fun of my country, making it sound bad. There are other countries out there with nuclear weapons that have gone missing. Russia keeps their mishaps pretty much secret. It's not the kind of thing they want to advertise. The end of the Cold War made many people feel a little safer, as if the end of the world was not just around the corner. There were a few, quite a few, unforeseen problems. Little things like missing nuclear weapons. As the Soviet Union went kaputski, thousands of soldiers found themselves far from home with no way of getting back. Many found the easiest way to get home was to sell any weapons they had, and this led to a lot of weapons of huge magnitude winding up in the hands of folks who should not be allowed to handle a slingshot, let alone nuclear weapons. As far as we know, the Soviet Union produced more than 27,000 nuclear weapons, along with enough weapons grade uranium and plutonium to build 3 times as many. Not knowing exactly where all these weapons were sent, there's no way of knowing how many ever or never returned after the collapse. The Nuclear Threat Initiative published a report September 1997 that quoted former Russian National Security Advisor Alexander Lebed, who said, the Russian military lost track of upwards of 100 nuclear suitcase bombs. These are small atomic bombs that you can literally carry as if in a suitcase. Lebed said each of the weapons was as powerful as a 1 kiloton warhead, capable of killing as many as 100,000 people, and they can be detonated by a single person. The Soviet Navy also had some issues when it came to nuclear weapons. April 7th, 1989, the Soviet Navy submarine Komsomolets was in the Barents Sea when a fire broke out. The submarine was able to surface, but the abrupt pressure change caused the top hatch to blow off, throwing 2 crewmen off the chamber. The submarine soon sank as water rushed back in through the hatch. We do know the sub was carrying at least two nuclear armed Shkval torpedoes. The Russian government located the wreck and they attempted to recover its nuclear reactor, but they were unsuccessful. Instead, the site has been covered in various substances to prevent, hopefully, any runaway reactors. The torpedo tubes were sealed with the weapons still in place as well. Nuclear weapons are just one of many difficulties when dealing with those pesky atoms. Too many nuclear reactors have gone postal due to accidents, mismanagement, and downright sloppy construction practices. I tried to look up to find out how many nuclear reactors were shut down or never able to open because of improper construction, but the list, I just couldn't find it. Plus, I was pretty worn out from all this other stuff I read. Globally, there have been at least 99, both civilian and military, recorded nuclear power plant accidents, and that's just from 1952 to 2009. These are the accidents we know of because the folks in charge were not able to sweep things under the carpet. How many nuclear oopses have there been where the crisis was averted at the last second and then the report was deemed top secret? We don't need to know all that. The problem isn't so much the nuclear reactors as the people who are supposed to know what they're doing. They say over and over, nothing can go wrong, and then it does. Hope you enjoyed tonight's show. If you did, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell people you don't even know they should be listening to Strange Things with Chris James. If you have any stories and you believe them to be true about UFOs, Bigfoot, other cryptids, ghosts, alien encounters, not folks from other countries, but aliens from outer space, anything like that, and you'd like to see them in print, send the stories to me and I'll put you in a book. Send your stories to strangethings@arkanasa.com. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.